But once Jordan gets the chance to sideboard, I think the control deck starts to gain some edge in this matchup.
Okay, and so, let's talk a little bit about how we expect things to play out. There's definitely the possibility that Michael just has a very nutty draw, that he goes, turn 1 Arbor Elf into like a Mulch or a Grizzly Salvage, puts some stuff into his graveyard,
right,
and then like gets a very early Angel of Serenity or develops his board a little bit, and then just Crater Hoofs Jordan.
So there's a couple ways a junk deck wins. And the first one you hit the nail on the head. There's these turn 4, turn 5 great Unburial Rites plays. As Jordan, I'm not as scared of those plays because I have a counterspell. I have counterspells. I have ways to deal with, the first Thragtusk or the first Angel is not a problem. Where it becomes a problem for Jordan is when it's the 5th Thragtusk, because then Jordan, if he can get on the back foot, like Michael can snowball with threats, and Jordan's not entirely able to deal with that.
Okay, so both players ended up keeping their 7. Jordan leads with the tap land. Michael has an accelerating start with an Avacyn's Pilgrim off of a forest.
Michael has exactly the kind of hand you mentioned too. He has a mulch. What I see in his hand, he has a Mulch, a Lingering Souls, and an Unburial Rites. So if that Mulch can hit, he's got the setup for a lot of plays.
Yeah. And even losing his turn 1 accelerator is not that bad because of this Mulch, which is going to get him, a land or 2 and hopefully put something useful in his graveyard. So the Mulch doesn't put anything useful in his graveyard, but it does get him 3 lands. So Michael is going to be set for the beginning of this matchup. He's going to make all of his land drops. He is going to be able to progress his board. And as long as he draws some threats, he's going to be able to participate in this matchup. Whereas Jordan may end up having to spend some card draw spells to make sure he hits his land drops. And so he's we haven't seen Jordan's hand extensively yet, so we don't know where he's at with it.
Right.
But he may have to go through more effort than Michael does to play this game.
Well, the thing is that because of the power level of Michael's spells, a lot of Jordan's cards don't, like outside of Sphinx's Revelation, and really the War Leader, a lot of Jordan's cards don't do anything.
Yeah.
Restoration Angel, Jordan's Restoration Angels are much worse than Michael's. They don't really compete with Thragtusks.
Yeah. So we got a little look at Jordan's hand. He has an Essence Scatter, he has an Augur of Bolus, he's got a Searing Spear, and it looked like he had a Dissipate as well. So he has some counter magic, but what he doesn't have is he doesn't have any lands, or maybe he has 1 land in his hand. So Michael's going to be able to just keep on, making his land drops, casting threats, and at some point Jordan may be sort of constrained by his mana.
Interesting enough, instead of casting a Lingering Souls off white mana there, Michael elected to Mulch again, so he clearly doesn't value that incremental damage in this matchup. Instead, what he prefers is really the Haymaker style.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
And he may be trying to get to a point that he can cast 2 spells in a turn and overload Jordan's.
Right, this was a little less mana. So like this is interestingly, like this was less mana efficient. The mana efficient thing would be Lingering Souls next turn, Flashback, and Mulch, or something like that.
That's true, and like the life loss from playing a land does not matter at all. So we see Jordan make his 4th land drop. He drew an island off the top, plays the Augur of Bolus, hits a Azorius Charm off of that.
I always get super excited when Augur Bolus finds a spell because I hate the card.
Yeah.
I hate the card.
Well, and it's particularly irrelevant in this matchup, but in general, it's gotten worse and worse in the metagame as the aggro decks have gotten a little bit bigger, and so the 3 toughness has been not as good.
Well, I mean, the math-wise is like it misses about a third of the time. So it's like you're playing in this matchup, it's like you're playing an Elvish Visionary that about a third of the time refuses to draw its card. You're like, ew, that's... that's not a particularly strong card.
Yeah. So we see Michael flashback the Lingering Souls now. Presumably he's going to have something else to do with his mana, otherwise he would prefer to have done that last time.
Maybe he didn't cast Lingering Souls, he flashed back instead.
Yeah, so that seems like the ideal time to be hard casting it from your hand, because your opponent doesn't have Dissipate open.
It's just more mana efficient.
Yeah, it's more mana efficient too. So maybe a slight misstep by Michael.
I mean, I suppose, he gets to know that his opponent doesn't have Syncopate, and I can't think of a reason to make that play that way.
Yeah. And if he was really worried about Syncopate, he could have just played a land untapped.
Right. Michael clearly is valuing his life total point where he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah. Which, is is probably from a little bit of lack of experience in this matchup. Although maybe he's used to playing a matchup where the blue-white-red deck is more aggressive.
Well,
maybe
they
has
play Geist,
of St.
the Geist deck,
and has a bigger burn package.
Interestingly, if he has Lingering Souls tokens, it looks like he does have the option of making his hand into a Gavony Township Lingering Souls style hand.
I think I prefer to have a couple more Lingering Souls tokens out before I start townshipping. But once I have 4 out, like I think that's a really good plan that forces your opponent to, to react to you.
Yeah, and really just to Supreme Verdict or Museum Mortars.
Yep. So it looks like we're going to have a Souls and a Flashback here. And so I believe Jordan has a Dissipate, and I think this is maybe a spot that he ends up wanting to pull the trigger on.
That's the exciting part. Especially for, that's why I don't understand why he didn't cast that last turn.
So Michael would have been much better off last turn casting the Lingering Souls from his hand.
Michael's got to be pretty happy that Dissipate was spent on Lingering Souls, considering all the things that Michael can cast in this matchup. If that's the one, Jordan only plays 3 hard counters in the deck, and the fact that one of the ones, and probably the only one in his hand, just ate a Lingering Souls has got to be great for Michael.
Yeah. So we see the Searing Spear from Jordan taking out the mana creature. Figuring that's about the best I'm going to get out of this card. It doesn't really
even more than that. What it does is that he's choking Michael on white sources. Which, if he's worried about an Angel of Serenity, which I would be, then I think that it's not the quantity of mana, it's the quality of mana he's attacking.
So we see another white source drawn by Michael here. It looks like the Godless Shrine. So he's got Unburial Rites. He's got the Gavony Township. He's got Temple Garden in his hand. And I think there's a Grizzly Salvage in there. And so Michael plays the Gavony Township, he attacks with his tokens, and he's just going to go ahead and make them a little bit bigger, put a clock on Jordan, force Jordan to do something on his main phase to deal with those tokens. That would have been a really sick time for Jordan to have drawn his one of Electricity in his deck.
Absolutely.
But instead we see a Sphinx's Revelation for 3, and that draws another Sphinx's Revelation. So Jordan's card advantage plan is now rolling, and it's just kind of a question of, can he get to enough resources that he can deal with all of Michael's threats before Michael gets those threats online. So it's kind of a race, but it's a card drawing race versus can I find enough threats.
Right, and Michael's a little low on threats right now.
Yeah.
So it's unlikely that Michael will be able to, kind of race the snowballing Sphinx's Revelations that Jordan's doing.
Yeah. So Michael draws a Grizzly Salvage for the turn. He's going to figure out his mana for this Gavony Township. He casts the Grizzly Salvage.
So when we look at the ways that Michael can, so Jordan has this plan that where he's going to, draw 3. He just drew 3, gain 3, and then he's going to start drawing 5, gaining 5. He'll, eventually just completely out-resource Michael. What Michael can try to do to stop that is he's gonna, if he can dig and possibly find a Crater Hoof Behemoth or something that can end the game very quickly, that's probably, he wants to play toward lines that do that.
Yeah.
If this game goes on 5 more turns, that's really bad for Michael.
Yeah. And knowing that Jordan doesn't have a ton of counter spells in his deck, and he already used one of them, one of the Dissipates for the Lingering Souls before, means that the Crater Hoof draw is really actually live.
Yeah, I mean, it still might not be because Jordan's drawing a lot of cards, but it's probably the best draw that Michael has.
Yeah. So we saw Michael Grizzly Salvage and take a Restoration Angel. Then he attacks with his 2 Lingering Souls tokens, Gavony Townships to make them a little bit bigger, gets in for 6 damage, and Jordan says, okay, I'll draw 4, gain 4 at the end of your turn.
So has Jordan found a Supreme Verdict yet?
I think he actually already had one in hand and just wanted to get his guys, draw his cards and, get set up so that he has a counterspell suite to back up the Supreme Verdict. It's possible that I misread the card in his hand, but I think he already had it.
And yeah, he did draw Aurelia the War Leader off that last Sphinx's Revelation, so that's his game win is now online.
Not that it was really necessary for him to find that early on. So we've got a Fistful of Lands. I thought I saw Essence Scatter. Yeah, there's Essence Scatter in his hand. I think there's another Sphinx's Revelation. There's the Aurelia the War Leader. Maybe a Snapcaster Mage, and actually he may not have drawn the Supreme Verdict yet.
Yeah, well, in that case, he's going to still have to answer the Spirit tokens. His deck has some answers to it. You know, he does have, in the main, he has 2 Supreme Verdicts. Once they get up to 4/4 size, he'll have to start, you know, doing things like Azorius charming them, which is, you know, not preferable. He has 1 Mizium Mortars, which is still live for 1 more turn.
Given that you've been outdrawing your opponent about 5 cards to 1, it's okay to
Exactly.
burn 2 Azorius charms to get rid of these 2 tokens. So we have a Thragtusk from Michael, and I'd imagine that this Essence Scatter is going to get played there. Just because Jordan doesn't have enough answers to what's already on the board, he kind of needs to keep that off there, even though he'd prefer to save it for something like a Craterhoof Behemoth or an Angel of Serenity. And he does have that Snapcaster Mage in hand, so he will get to reuse the Essence Scatter if he wants at some point.
All right, so Jordan down to 7 now from Lingering Souls tokens.
Yeah. So if you're Michael, do you actually want to cast the Thragtusk there, or would it have been better to to use the Gavany Township again?
Well, I do think that once there are 3/3s, increasing 3/3s to 4/4s doesn't really increase your clock by too much, and it doesn't really. I mean, it makes your guys Searing Spear proof, which is relevant, but outside of that, it doesn't really ensure your guys from any more kill spells. So I'd say they're like 3/3s and 4/4 flyers are somewhat the same.
So we saw an end of turn Searing Spear from Jordan Judson, and he just untapped and cast Aurelia, the War Leader, and with the Snapcaster Mage he used to cast that Searing Spear, he actually had lethal. So we had a very, you know, we got to see there, although not in detail, how fast Aurelia, the War Leader, is able to just kill everybody. So Michael Nixon went from 14 to -1 in a flash.
I mean, the strength behind Aurelia is it typically wins the turn you play it, or you have to go through. There are very few hoops you have to jump through to make that happen.
Yeah. So we're going to cut back to the booth here, and we're going to give you a trivia question. What's this trivia question up for?
Well, this is the last. This one is for a year of Star City Premium. So we go 3 months, then 6 months, and if you stay with us all the way through the finals, our last trivia question is for a year.
Awesome. So we're very excited that Star City Games is going to be hosting GP Miami at the end of June.
For any of you who
20th through 30th.
came out to GP Charlotte, which was the last one that Star City Games hosted, we did commentary for. It was one of the best GPs I've been to in a long time. It was, you know, it wasn't just, it was more, the whole GP was an event on top of just being a GP. It was really a great time. You know, the turnout certainly reflected that, as it was a 2,700 man tournament, but there were, you know, there was a meet and greets, plenty of really neat side events. I mean, there was a 10K on Sunday, a lot of really neat stuff. So GP in Miami, if it's anything close to that, it's something you definitely would want to make it out for.
And so if you're a fan of Cedric Phillips, who we saw all day yesterday, and hopefully we'll see some more of today, Cedric's going to be doing commentary there, and he's also going to be debuting his new token.
His new Goblin token.
Which is relevant because that's what he's playing in Legacy today. And so you'll be able to get that new token. He's also doing a meet and greet, so if you would like to have your Goblin token, or perhaps, you know, a Goblin Lackey or some other Goblin, maybe a Goblin Bloom Brigade, if you're a fan of his stream, signed, he will be doing that. But so, our trivia question for today is about GP Miami.
All right, what is it?
We've got a website set up that has all the information about, you know, when it is, which is June 28th through 30th, the format standard, all the guests that we've got. The question for you, the listeners, is what is the URL for that website? So send us a tweet at hashtag SCG Premium with your answer to what is the URL for the website for GP Miami, and from among all the correct answers, we'll pick one randomly to get a year of Star City Premium.
All right. Sounds great. Well, let's get back to the finals here. We have Jordan Judson now 1 game away from securing the Standard Open Championship. He's playing blue, white, red. We saw that last game. Able to play 2 Revelations into each other, then untap and win the game with Aurelia, the War Leader. Kind of a textbook execution of the game plan of the deck.
Yeah. So one of the things that you said leading up to this match was that we think that Michael Nixon's main deck is sort of better positioned for this matchup. That, you know, he doesn't really have any dead cards. He's got, you know, a game plan that is generally going to trump Jordan's, but that Jordan has a much better sideboard for this matchup than Michael does, so he's going to improve more. So why don't we talk a little bit about what we think Jordan's going to be doing post-sideboard here.
Well, post-sideboard, post-sideboard in the matchup, one of the worries game one, which actually turned out not to be the case, was that Michael can go over the top of a lot of Jordan's control spells. A lot of his things, Pillar of Flame, it can answer a mana creature, but a lot of those control cards become really dead pretty quickly in the matchup. It's better oftentimes for him to try to answer Thragtusk's, this Angel Thragtusk combo with his own Angel Thragtusk combo, and that's why we see Clone in his sideboard. He's playing 4 Restoration Angels. Now as long as he has a Clone in his hand, he can't really lose that Angel Thrag. It's hard for him to lose the Angel Thragtusk for. So Clone is one of the first cards that we see coming in the matchup. I possibly also would see something like Angel of Serenity. So it's interesting. In a lot of ways, he can slide in a lot of the same cards that Michael's playing, and that really takes away Michael's late game. Because if they have equal late games, Jordan, being the Revelation deck, becomes a stronger favorite.
Okay. I've got 2 questions about cards in this sideboard. I noticed that there's a Singleton Counterflux in Jordan's sideboard. We talked a bit about how Dissipate seemed like it was probably useful in this matchup. Do we bring in the 4th hard counterspell here?
Well, the 3-mana counterspells are just okay in the matchup. Dissipate's pretty nice because it exiles it, and Michael's deck does tend to play out of the graveyard. I'm not positive. It depends what he has to side out in the matchup. You certainly can board it in. It's another kill spell, and it depends whether you like it more than the kill spells you're already playing. Okay. Certainly, I think that cards like Electrickery do get sided out in this matchup, but I don't know how many of these Perfume spells he actually would like to replace.
Yeah. And then the second question is, so we've got a lot of burn spells in Jordan's deck. Does it make sense to sideboard some of those out and bring in the Is It Static Casters as the way to control the Mana Creatures and Lingering Souls tokens? If
you care about Mana Creatures and Lingering Souls, Static Caster is better than the burn spells. If that's it with how the matchup plays out, it might just be that you hope to Supreme Verdict all of them. I mean, as far as the Mana Creatures, you may just hope to Supreme Verdict them and not care. Okay. You may not want to side in a card that's only supposed to answer those. And the Lingering Souls token, if you're already trying to be on, the Angel Thragtusk plan, and I'm putting kind of Thragtusk in quotes with Clone, you might be able to ignore those as well.
Okay.
So I think you can side in depending on how you want to approach the matchup, but I think it's also definitely acceptable to leave them in the board.
So if you were sideboarding for Jordan, you'd take a smaller sideboard plan of, I'm going to bring in Clones, I'm going to bring in the 4th Supreme Verdict, and maybe I bring in the Angel of Serenity. That would
be my first guess as to how I would try to sideboard it. Granted, when I played Blue Red, I've played more of a Reckoner version, so it's a little different. But I imagine it's similar. But you can play it the other way as well, would be my guess.
Okay. And so talking about this from Michael's side of things, one thing that I think is a slam dunk here is Obsidian Ghost Council.
Absolutely.
It's there for these control matchups. It's very hard for your opponent to remove if they have all sorcery speed and burn removal because it has the 5 toughness and it's never there on your opponent's turn. And with that, of course, you bring in the Cavern of Souls because you want it to be uncounterable, and you're also interested in not relying on your mana creatures quite as much.
Right.
You'd like to have an extra land. Are there other cards that we want to bring in this matchup?
Well, he has a 3rd Acidic Slime in the sideboard, and against decks that are trying to Sphinx's Revelation, Acidic Slime is an amazing card. It's it will take 1 card off all their Sphinx's Revelations for the rest of the game. Attacking their mana base against a deck that says Mana Pongers, that's always good.
Yep. So it looks like we're looking at bringing in the Cavern of Souls, 2 Obsidots, and 1 more Acidic Slime. Are there cards that we think are not particularly good in here? Is Garrick Relentless less impressive here because the Flash Angels are good at handling it?
I think you still want it.
Okay.
But we have Jordan on 6 cards on the draw here.
Yep. So Michael was on the play, and we had a buddy land from both sides. Michael has a Deathrite Shaman here.
Take that out of the board, probably just to attack Snapcaster Mage.
Okay.
Jordan only does have 3 Revelations, so when he plays a 2nd Revelation, oftentimes it's going to be a Snapcastered Revelation. Deathrite, if provided Jordan is light on removal, Deathrite Shaman can take away that 2nd Revelation.
Okay. So Jordan gets to play his 2nd land. The fact that he played a Clifftop Retreat into an island may indicate that he has. So it either indicates that he has a burn spell that he wanted to have available for an early mana creature, or it may indicate that he has kind of a clunky mana draw here, right?
Well, I mean, I think he doesn't actually have any spells on 1, but he has plenty of spells on 2, Searing Spear, Azorius Charm. I think it's probably just the correct way to sequence his lands. But yes, it does mean he doesn't have an island or a plains or a mountain.
And like he doesn't have one of the Ravnica shock lands. So we see him cycle a Azorius Charm at end of turn.
And it looks like he's digging for lands here.
Yeah, he's got a Cavern in hand, and it looks like he's got Electrickery. Does he have 2 Caverns in hand?
So he doesn't have a Cavern in no, he only has 1 Cavern in his 75, so okay. I don't think he can have a second one in his hand. Or no, yep, he only has 1.
Must be some other gold card. Maybe he has an Aurelia in hand. So Electrickery on Avacyn's Pilgrim, which seems like a fine play given that Michael missed his 3rd land drop. And we'll find out what that Cavern is on in a moment. And Jordan has the option of getting rid of future mana creatures with the Mizium Warriors in his hand. Michael exiles the Azorius Charm on Jordan's end step and burns Jordan for 2 there.
Because of how Jordan's deck works, its Deathrite Shaman shouldn't really run out of fodder at any point.
Yeah. So it looks like Michael drew a Grizzly Salvage for the turn. He's got a number of Restoration Angels. He's got Acidic Slime. And really, he just needs to start hitting land drops. It looks like he's got an Obsidian and 1 other card. It's either a Cavern or a gold card.
We'll probably see this Grizzly Salvage dig for a land then if he's searching for lands. His hand has enough play in it, Acidic Slime into Angel, that if he can get that going, and Jordan doesn't have a burn spell, then that's, then that can just be his game plan.
Yeah. And I guess he must have had the Grizzly Salvage in hand and drawn the Cavern for this turn, because he certainly would have played it last turn. I'd imagine that Cavern is on Spirit or Advisor.
And it is.
Yeah.
Yep. So that should be a tell that there's an Obsidian in his hand.
And so we're going to cast. I'd imagine we're going to cast Grizzly Salvage here. Go ahead and find another land.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that he would make the Cavern before playing Grizzly Salvage here in case he finds a land. Because by doing it in this order, he has gotten rid of his Deathrite Shaman activation.
Yep. And he's signaling before he needs to that Obsidian is an issue.
Right. He probably takes one of the shock lands here because he will want to make sure that his future lands come into play untapped.
Yep.
And 2 life is probably a fine price to pay now. I mean, you can pay 2 life now or 2 life later.
And another issue with playing the Cavern here is now he doesn't have the option of playing one of these shock lands tapped and saving the 2 life.
Exactly.
Which it turned out that the life was semi-relevant last game. He was being conservative about his life total, but it's possible to get burned out from a fairly high life total with Aurelia in your opponent's deck. So he does take the Overgrown Tomb, and Jordan at the end of turn casts a Think Twice, then untaps. Let's see. So he drew, looks like a Steam Vents for his turn. So he's going to be able to make his 4th land drop.
Interesting. So both players have tons of action and not as many lands. So I feel like it's a little bit of a fight to see who can get more lands. Jordan's has Think Twice. I think it's pretty relevant that Michael has a grip of Acidic Slime with Acidic Slime in it, though.
Yep. So one option that we didn't consider is using the Cavern and putting it on Ooze for the Acidic Slime.
Right.
And Michael is going to be able to cast either an Obsidian or an Ooze on this turn because he's going to be able to use the Deathrite Shaman for mana.
Yeah, I think that Michael clearly sees the Obsidian as the more important card in the matchup. Yeah. It's interesting because he gets to use one of those 2 cards as a test spell if he wants to. I mean, you don't have to have a test spell for Obsidian because it'd be a test spell for some sort of removal.
Yep.
As opposed to being a test spell for a counter spell.
Yeah. And while Michael doesn't know Jordan's hand like we do, he may have been able to deduce the fact that Jordan was somewhat land-light, given the lands that Jordan played, that he played a Cavern on turn 3, indicating that he probably doesn't have any more lands in his hand because it constrained the colors that he could cast.
So Michael's going to go to work with Obsidat. Uncounterable due to Cavern mana, though, to be fair, he already kind of knows Jordan doesn't have a counterspell based on the lands Jordan left up.
Yep. Yeah, the only counterspell he could have is Essence Scatter.
Right.
So Obsidat comes into play, drains for 2, then exiles itself at the end of turn. And if you're Michael, are you just putting...
Do you ever attack?
Yeah, do you ever attack if Jordan has untapped mana?
Well, probably not. I would prefer not to, because that opens me up to Azorius Charm. At the same time, if you only ever blink it, Jordan, it's slow enough that Jordan might be able to start revelationing before you actually kill him. So there's a really interesting trade-off there.
Yeah. And given that you have the Cavern, it's not the worst thing in the world for it to be Azorius Charmed.
Right.
Especially if that gets Jordan to tap out and you get to slime him, right?
Yeah, it means Jordan doesn't... Yeah, it means Jordan doesn't draw a card with Azorius Charm, which is almost... I think I actually would attack him. I'm not as scared about losing the Obsidat. I mean, the other way you can lose Obsidat by attacking it is something like Snapcaster Mage, block, jump, Searing Spear.
Yeah.
Which, that would be a little unfortunate, I think, if that happened.
If your opponent's not getting any value off the Snapcaster Mage because you have a Deathrite Shaman,
right?
Is a 2-for-1 okay there with Obsidat?
It's probably still fine. I mean, Michael has a follow-up play of Angel of Serenity. It's in his hand, so I think he, because of the Angel of Serenity and the fact he has Acidic Slimes, I think he can afford to be very aggressive with this Obsidat.
And interestingly, they both have Angel of Serenity in their hand.
Right.
Jordan,
always fun.
Jordan clearly did follow your sideboarding plan. He has a clone and he has an Angel. He may have 2 clones. So we see Jordan here, Mizium Mortars the Deathrite Shaman, which is not going to set back Michael on mana. We know he has a 5th land in hand.
There is the worry, if Michael probably knows that clone's coming in. If you don't exile the Obsidat, it can be cloned, which...
Right, but there's no reason for him to not exile the Obsidat, right?
Right, I mean, I think right now, the only reason is if he wants to push, so he's going to, he's going to attack with it.
Yeah.
So it can't actually be cloned. Yeah, the swing only plays around Azorius Charm.
And Michael has a Restoration Angel in hand in case he wants to play around that, but I think he wants to use that on the Acidic Slime and just, nuke Jordan's lands to, Kingdom Come. So assuming Jordan doesn't have an Essence Scatter here, we're going to be able to get rid of a blue-producing land, and then next turn...
Yep, he looks like he's trying to take him off of white mana as opposed to taking him off of blue mana. By how he chose the land, my guess is that he's trying to take him off of white mana.
Yeah, it's a choice between trying to take him off blue-white or blue-red, but yeah.
And we'll see clone on Acidic Slime, so I think both players with... I believe Jordan also has a Restoration Angel, so we're going to kind of see land destruction wars starting here.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this clone for Jordan is that it's an answer to the Obsidat, kind of, in that it slows down the clock.
Well, it also took Michael off of white mana.
Oh, interesting.
So Michael, it may be his undoing with that Acidic Slime if he can't get more white mana, the actual Resto Acidic Slime is available to Jordan, but not actually available to Michael.
So we have a mulch here, which may get white mana for
Michael.
It does not. So we get a Gavany Township, which presumably Michael is going to play because he wants to continue developing his board, but it's going to get slimed when Jordan blinks his clone.
Yeah, this is getting pretty... This Acidic Slime really kind of is backfiring for Michael Nixon. That said, he did find one more white source.
Yeah. So one other play that Jordan might take advantage of is if he's concerned about the Obsidat, he can actually hold the Restoration Angel and not use it to blink the Acidic Slime, and instead blink the clone during Michael's turn and have it clone the Obsidat and Legend Rule it out.
Right.
Which, given that Michael just hit 3 lands off of mulch, might be a better play for him because he's not going to win this land destruction war.
No, and I think that's a pretty heads-up play that you can use the Restoration Angel to Legend Rule the Obsidat. What Jordan has to be concerned about is how he's actually going to win the game. He has this Angel of Serenity in his hand, But based off all the things in Michael Nixon's yard, you have to think that one Angel Serenity is not going to be enough. You know, all it takes is one Unburial Rites in Michael's hand, or another Angel Serenity in his hand, and you're going to lose that Angel War. Right now, Jordan doesn't have a concrete plan for winning the late game.
And this is a point that Jordan might be kicking himself at saying, I really wish I had had 2 Rest in Peace in my sideboard, so that if I drew it now, I'd actually be able to stabilize. And he's in a tough position. I think he actually needs to do the Restoration Angel plan to get rid of that Obsidat, because he's gotten
5.
so low in life.
He's a 5 with Outer Revelation, so right now, yes, there's this problem that just blinking Obsidat is insane against him.
Yeah. So, have some question about what the clone is?
Yeah.
I think we're probably going to see the White Land and Restoration Angel and Land Destruction U play here.
We could also see Restoration Angel flickering the Obsidat, actually, just to deal 2 more damage. And Jordan's at 5.
Yep.
That's not unreasonable. I think I still prefer the Land Destruction play, but it's close.
Yeah. And it looks like we actually have an Unburial Rites happening here. Michael pointed to something in his graveyard. The glare is a little bit hard for us to tell.
On targeting Crate, he's going for Crater
boy.
Behemoth. So it's just going to trying to end the game immediately.
Yeah. Sorry guys that we didn't catch the Crater Hoof and the Unburial Rites had both gone.
Yeah, the Unburial Rites was hiding off the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
So.
I know Crater Hoof got hit by the second mulch there, I believe, that previous turn, and so looks like Jordan got caught with his not caught unprepared, and this Crater Hoof is going to be lethal. He doesn't have a good answer to it.
If he had more creatures in play, he could let it resolve and flicker clone, make his own
copy
Crater
it,
Hoof,
and then be able to
then blow him out on the blocks.
The fact that we've got this acidic slime that's going to be a 6/6 with Death Touch, though, means that 6/6 with Death Touch and Trample means that you need to put 2 blockers in front of that, and so you would need 4 creatures at a minimum to do it, and it's just not enough. So Jordan's going to think through his outs, make sure he's not missing anything, but momentarily we're going to be shuffling up for Game 3 with Jordan Judson with Blue-White Red Flash and Michael Nixon with Junk Reanimator tied up 1-1 in the finals of the Seattle Star City Standard Open. So Crater Hoof has made it into play. We've given some stuff. So the Crater Hoof and the Acidic Slime. Well, so this is still lethal. But the Crater Hoof and the Acidic Slime are the only ones attacking.
Well, interestingly, because the Acidic Slime has Death Touch here, it's a 6/6 Death Touch trample.
Yeah.
Rules out that makes it very hard to block, or to stop it from dealing damage to you.
Yeah.
It only has to assign 1 damage to each blocker.
So the relevant rule here is that when you have a Death Touch Trampler, or when you have a creature with Death Touch, it only needs to assign lethal damage to each creature.
A creature with trample.
And so
because Death Touch means lethal is 1.
Yeah. So a 6/6 Death Touch, you assign 1 damage to one blocker, 1 damage to another, and then the rest you get to trample over. Or in this case, we're going to assign 1 damage to one blocker, and the remaining 5 is going to trample over.
So this clone, the Flicker clone, Legend Ruling Obsidat, will put Jordan up to 7. He still is dead right now.
Yeah, I think it's Flickering Clone copying the Crater Hoof, giving my guys +2/+2. That's going on.
The problem is that he's still dead.
Yeah. So
because of how the Death Touch trample rule works, he is still dead.
Yeah. But maybe Michael's a judge, so he better.
Michael's an L2 judge, so hopefully he knows how this works.
Yeah.
So how did Michael assign the damage is the question.
So we
clearly he did not assign it lethally.
So let's
we'll
when
update
we get a
you on
chance,
life
we'll
totals.
get the updated life totals,
Michael
and we'll
had the
find out what
option.
happened there. But that should have
much
been a
to the
lethal
scorn
attack.
of judges everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know Michael personally, but I'm definitely going to talk to the judge staff here, find somebody that does know him, and make sure that person gives him a ribbing.
It seems very. Okay, so he has him at 3.
Yeah.
All right, yep, that would mean that he only assigned two trample.
Yeah, so it was 2 trample from the Crater Hoof that was a 9/9 versus a Crater Hoof of 7/7 that got assigned to Jordan, and the 6/6 Death Touch did.
And it was a 5/6 Angel.
Yeah, 5/6 Angel.
So yes, he assigned all 6 damage to the Restoration Angel.
So Jordan Judson draws land and casts the last card in his hand, which is Angel of Serenity, stealing all 3 of the creatures.
So there's a chance. I mean, Michael still has a Restoration Angel in play in hand, so he can just drain for 2, Resto, Flicker, Obsidat, drain for 2.
So, despite the misstep in the previous turn,
he'll just have to win 1 turn later.
Should be able to get this.
We have something that may be valuable.
And there it is.
I'm going to do this, and you're going to die, and
On
give me
to
my
game
guys
3.
back.
Please come see us when you're through with your match.
So you see there, yeah, you talked about the lack of rest and peace in Jordan's sideboard, and that certainly is a thing. Is a thing that Michael gets. Michael's deck is capable of producing so many continuous threats. Especially when he has like a mulch opening or a Grisly Salvage opening. That the fact that Jordan doesn't have rest and peace means that he really needs to, instead of answering everything, he needs to do powerful things of his own. So when he has hands without Sphinx's Revelations in them, he can really just get too far on the back foot.
Yeah. So one thing I've learned from playing Legacy is that when I'm building a sideboard and I'm playing some cards that are for specific matches, I really like to diversify my threats a little bit, so that 1, my opponent has a hard time dealing with these things, but 2, I'm able to attack my opponent from different angles. So you could say that the 3 clones are for Thragtusk decks, and that that one of the main Thragtusk decks you have to worry about is this Junk Reanimator deck. And if I were building a sideboard, for a blue-white-red deck here, I might like to say, okay, well, I'll have 2 clones, and I'm going to use one of those spots for another bullet that attacks from a different angle, like a Rest in Peace.
Right. Well, one of the things we are bringing you back to Luthier, the players are taking a quick break before game 3. Is that this is a 3 Snapcaster Mage deck, which and because of it has lots of 1-ofs and maybe having a full set of Revelations, and it has its own Think Twices, Rest in Peace does a lot of collateral damage on the deck itself.
That's true.
So a lot of times in these decks you'll see things like maybe Purify the Grave as
or a Tormod's Crypt.
Maybe Tormod's Crypt. Tormod's Crypt is it's kind of a dumpy card. You hope not, like you'd want something with bigger impact. I don't know. So something that you're not as embarrassed to play, I guess. Like Tormod's Crypt sees playing Legacy because the fact that it has a 0 in the upper right-hand corner is really important.
Yeah.
Because when you're not playing Legacy, the actual effect is not worth a card most of the time, unless if your opponent's playing something like a Dredge deck, sure. But
yeah, and so frequently in Standard, when you are playing Rest in Peace, you're using it as a Tormod's Crypt, but it's still gaining you value because your opponent still needs to answer that.
Because it's
with
also a ley line of the blade.
Yeah.
So continue. The amount of advantage you get from Rest in Peace in a lot of matchups is actually worth an entire card. Yeah. Whereas a one-shot Tormod's Crypt is usually not.
Okay. Cool. So we saw that game, play out in sort of the more combo-y manner that we talked about.
Yeah.
That, there's a Crater Hoof Behemoth that gets milled at some point, and there's Unburial Rites, and you get up to enough creatures that you just.
Well, I think these first 2 games have really showcased, the proactive game plans of each deck. Game 1, we saw Blue, White, Red do exactly what it wants to do, where it goes, 3 removal spells, small revelation, a couple removal spells, medium revelation, more removal spells, huge revelation, win game. I was like, all right, that is how Blue, White, Red, that's one of its tried and true ways of winning. And then game 2, we saw the Junk Reanimator deck. You're like, okay, dump things into graveyard, threat, and then win the game that way. So, if you're newer to Standard, these are 2 of the best game plans right now.
Yeah. And the nice thing about game 2 is we also got to see some of the counter strategies that were happening. That the Junk Reanimator deck was looking to work on resource denial with acidic slimes as a way to slow down the Sphinx's Revelation deck and prevent them from drawing a bunch of cards and make sure that your game plan ended up trumping theirs. And there was a counter strategy on Jordan's side that he was bringing in these clones that was going to answer the Thragtusk, and we were going to be able to counter that part of Michael Nixon's strategy of, I'm going to play these good cards that all are 2-for-1s and are very hard to deal with threats by, getting the same threats but cheaper for Jordan. And so that's one of the nice things about these decks, that they have these interplays and they've got a strategy and a counter strategy and a counter strategy. We saw the Obsidian, Cavern of Souls, and the clone in your deck that has a Restoration Angel can be even a counter strategy to that.
Right.
And so that's a fun little aspect of this format.
Well, I really like that, you see a card like Clone seeing a lot of play. Previous formats we've seen, Phantasmal Image saw a lot of play when it was still legal. And people are saying, okay, it's Clone, but it's 2 mana. It's really good. It comes back with Sun Titan. It's got synergies. Now we're just seeing, Clone. Not, the card from Alpha still going back and seeing play, which is really neat.
Well, it's amazing that, we're still discovering so much Magic technology and Magic theory 20 years into the game that, it took us having a Phantasmal Image, having Phantasmal Image printed to realize how good clone effects are, that we now are able to recognize the times in the metagame that they're powerful enough even at 4. And I think, like, 2 years ago, if we had this meta, that we would not have necessarily realized that clone was an option to bring in your sideboards, because we hadn't realized that it was so good. And I think something similar happened with Preordain a couple of standard seasons ago, that we just, before Preordain was printed, we didn't realize how strong card selection was in non-combo decks.
Right.
But some smart people, kind of stumbled upon it and put it in a blue-white deck and realized that the card selection was actually really valuable, and that led to us realizing how strong Ponder was last year in Delver.
We've had creatures with such strong enter the battlefield abilities, and creatures, such like hexproof legendary creatures, that Clone has really come back and seen play.
Yeah. So we're off to a start in Game 3. We have both players on 7 cards, and we've gone land go, and Michael is now mulching, and he's going to draw 2 off that mulch, hitting 2 more mulches that go to his graveyard. So he doesn't get to stock his graveyard with very much, but he's going to make sure that he hits land drops for the next few turns.
I want to talk about a couple sideboard cards that are in Jordan Judson's hand. He does have the Is It Staticaster that you had mentioned before in his hand. He also has boarded in Jace Memory Adept in the matchup. Oftentimes a control deck will go on a route of Jace Mill to win, where you essentially mill the Reanimator deck, which I know, sounds great. But then you start Supreme Verdicting every turn. You basically just you stall the game for 4 turns while Jace gets their deck.
And so in order for that plan to be achieved, you have to have drawn a few times with Sphinx's Revelation to have enough cards that you can, and have enough mana that you can execute the plan of Jace, mill you, and have drawn enough Supreme Verdicts, right?
Yep, exactly. So Jordan fishes for a land with Think Twice, does manage to find it. All his lands are M10 duels, so everything's still entering the battlefield tapped.
Yep. And we saw that Michael, with that mulch, getting 2 cards off of it, ended up having too many cards in hand and had to discard it. He discarded on Burial Rights. So I got a card. I didn't actually have to discard a card.
I'm not positive Michael's kept in all his. We'll see if he's. I'm not positive he's kept in all his Lingering Souls.
Yeah, we did not see any in Game 2.
No, and he boarded in Deathrite Shamans, which means something else did come out.
And the Obstats,
Yeah. So this Is It Staticaster in Jordan's hand may be a little, maybe underwhelming.
Yeah. And so Michael is testing the waters with a Thragtusk. He's got the Obsidian in his hand and another Thragtusk. And I think he's going to wait for the Obsidian until he either sees that the coast is clear or until he hits a cavern.
And is that interesting dynamic? Michael's deck's very good at producing lots of threats over and over. He already has a Thragtusk, an Obsidat, and a Unburial Rights. So he has basically 4 Haymakers at this point. And it's really the question is, can Blue White Red keep pace with this?
Yeah. And so Jordan has a couple choices on how he can choose to deal with this. He's got a Detention Sphere, he's got a Clone. He ends up deciding to clone the Thragtusk. He's going to get some incidental life off of that. He's going to be able to trade it off. So it's a 1-for-1 that he pays 1 less mana for. And the incidental life, I think, is probably better for Jordan than it is for Michael. But unfortunately, that opens the door for Michael to get Obzdot into play. He's going to drain for 2. He's going to exile it. And we saw how strong this card was for Michael last game, because it's just very, very difficult for Jordan to remove.
Right. I mean, it is hard for Jordan to remove. It means Jordan will have to start using Revelations. Jordan takes the 5 from Thragtusk here because he wants the opportunity to draw a Restoration Angel for the clone. Remember, Jordan's goal here really is to just stay alive until he has about 9 lands in play and start Revelationing.
Yeah. And so
or maybe it's a Revelation and then, like, get this Jace plan to work.
And so there was definitely a better sequencing for Michael there. If he attacks with Thragtusk, he offers the opportunity for Jordan to make a mistake and trade off his clone for the Thragtusk, then cast the Obzdot. It's much better for Michael in that situation because, one, there isn't the Restoration Angel, Blink the Clone, Legend Rule, the Obzdot issue, but also there's no longer a 5-power guy that can block Obzdot. So if Jordan taps out, Obzdot starts being able to get in.
I mean, just a general principle, you want to play your creatures post-combat unless they affect the combat.
Yeah. But Michael was probably really excited to be able to say, "Oh, I'm going to land this card that is likely to win the game."
And I think sometimes you are deciding on lines and you end up mis-sequencing things because you kind of change your mind halfway through. It turns out not to have much of an effect.
Yep.
And because of the Gavany Township he's drawn, Obzdot. Well, he can still swing the Obzdot and represent Gavany Township and then not use it. Obviously, if he taps it and the Obzdot comes back, he'll have to keep putting the counter on it. It doesn't come back with the 1/1 counter. But
at this point, I think Michael's going to be happy to just keep attacking with the Thragtusk until Jordan either trades off or does something and not expose the Obzdot to a Azorius Charm.
5 mana return's great. 5 damage returns is great.
So Jordan looks like he's got a Searing Spear.
He's got to hope there's no Restoration Angel.
Yeah.
And there is...
Doesn't look like it.
There's a second Obzdot in Michael's hand as well.
Yeah.
It means you may see him play this first Obzdot more aggressively.
So I'd imagine that Michael's... Oh.
And he does have Gavany Township,
Gavany Township?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's going to use that to save the Thragtusk.
I guess Michael.
I'm wondering whether Jordan Judson saw this. He may have missed the Gavany Township. He made that play. Now he's going to get the Staticaster. Yeah, he's going to get the Staticaster on it. Shooting. Oh, he wants to get this. So he's going to get the. Is it the Avacyn's Pilgrim before it grows, which is probably better, because he can still trade clone for the Thragtusk.
Sure, but he doesn't want to trade clone for the Thragtusk, right?
Not particularly. I think he may be forced. He may be forced to.
Yeah. So Michael is content to not cast spells. He's got a fair number of threats that are hard to deal with out on the board, and so the Gavany Township just allows him to force Jordan to expend resources to deal with what's going on. He follows up with a post-combat Deathrite Shaman, which is going to make it hard for Jordan to get any sort of advantage off of the Snapcaster if he's able to untap with it. Jordan goes ahead, untaps, draws a land for the turn. He's got a Snapcaster, an Essence Scatter, a Detention Sphere, and one more card.
Remember that Jordan's plan still revolves around Jace Memory Adept here. Yeah. He really only needs to stay alive long enough to be able to... He just needs to be able to get a board state where he can protect that Jace for 4 turns.
Yep.
Maybe even just 3 turns because Michael's cast a Mulch and the game's late enough.
So, looks like we're going to Detention Sphere, the Thragtusk, and that needs to get the clone as well. And our judge is on the case. It's too late.
I'm not sure Jordan's really happy with how that worked out. It does. So the reading on Detention Sphere is you may exile target non-land permanent, not named Detention Sphere, and all of the permanents with the same name as that permanent. It does not say it does not say card because it says permanent, right?
Yep.
Because it says permanent instead of card.
One of the copyable values is the name.
Right.
And so that is what Detention Sphere is getting.
Now, if it said each card with the same name, then it would not get it. Correct?
No, it would get it.
Okay, it would still get it?
Yeah, because the clone is still a card.
Okay.
If it was a token copy, it would not get it, but we don't use that wording.
Okay.
There are sort of issues with that when we're talking about things going to the graveyard. We often talk about cards going to the graveyard, not permanents.
Permanents
or
from the battlefield and cards from anywhere, and you get weird things happening there.
Anyways, that's a tangent that isn't super relevant.
Yeah.
So we have passed the turn to Michael. He drew a Grizzly Salvage for the turn, and turns over a Grizzly Salvage, 3 lands, and a Thragtusk. And this is after draining Jordan for 2 with the Obsidian. Flip that over.
Yeah, Jordan on the back foot again. He's having trouble dealing with kind of just, this snowballing of threats that Junk Reanimator's doing.
At this point, I think if I'm Michael, I'm pretty happy just getting in with the Thragtusk token, being able to trade it for your opponent's beast, and well, actually, maybe you wait a turn, township twice so that you don't trade. But anyways, he has the opportunity with the Deathrite Shaman and the Obzet to just sort of burn Jordan out over the next 2 turns.
Yeah, he's dealing 4 damage a turn right now. I don't think he can be pretty conservative here. It's really just Sphinx's Revelation he has to worry about.
And I think he's actually in a spot that he would prefer not to cast spells, not to cast that Thragtusk there, because Jordan has to deal with this stuff and expend mana, and you'd rather have the Thragtusk available if Jordan manages to, do stuff to deal with their existing
It's like
threats.
a yes and no, because I think really the only thing he's worried about is Revelation.
Okay.
And the way to play around Revelation is just to throw damage as fast as possible. Is make your opponent is to kill your opponent.
That's reasonable.
He's gonna draw, then mill. So he gets a Dissipate. Doesn't. I don't know if he wants to shock to leave up the mana for that Dissipate. That's an awfully. I mean, he can't.
Dead
He
on
can't.
board
He's dead if he does
that.
Okay, and he's dead on board.
Yeah. So assuming Michael sees that he can activate Deathrite Shaman twice.
I don't think he's supposed to leave that up. And that should be the game.
All right. Do you have a kill spell for my Deathrite Shaman?
You're at
6.
4. I mean, he can
You're
snap. No,
2.
he can't. I was gonna say he could snapcast whatever spell he targets in response, but he can't. Doesn't have enough mana to do that.
You're at 2. Are you at 2? Are you at 0?
And there we go.
All right.
So
Congratulations.
Michael Nixon, your Star City Games Seattle Standard Open champion, defeating Jordan Judson 2-1.
Yeah. Good job, Jordan, getting this far. You had this awesome game 1. You played it, the way that you needed to play in order to win that game 1. But game 2 and game 3 just didn't go his way. Michael, good job. You got there. Congratulations. And we're going to be coming back to the booth in just a minute.
So